Every house, every king, and every battle has its own truth. But there are stories older than crowns, darker than the night, and more dangerous than any blade. They were never written in books. They were whispered to fire, to the trees, and to the dead gods. And today, we dare to uncover one of them. The Riverlands had not yet healed. The war was over, or so the ravens claimed, but the land still bled. Villages lay charred to the bone, fields lay bare and salted, and the river that once fed a dozen towns now carried the stink of rot downstream. Travelers spoke in whispers, for in those parts, even the trees seemed to listen. Through this wounded realm rode Sir Edric Piper, heir to Pink Maiden Castle, a young knight of laughing eyes and too honest heart, once known for his songs more than his sword. His banners were tattered, his men fewer than a dozen, and their mounts half-starved from the road. Yet still, Edric held his head high. For his task, though small, was a matter of honor. He was to escort a holy envoy from King's Landing to the Twins. A peace mission, they said, though peace was a word few dared speak aloud. The envoy was Sir Lancel Lannister, cousin to the Queen Regent, and one-time squire to the late King Robert. Once golden and proud, Lancel now rode shrouded in a plain gray cloak, his frame gaunt, his eyes hollow. He bore a small septon's chain around his neck and carried a leather-bound copy of the seven-pointed star, its edges worn from use. He had taken vows of piety, renouncing wine and women, though not, it seemed, his guilt. They rode beneath a weeping sky, the rain thin and cold. The countryside was a graveyard, blackened farmhouses, broken keeps, the wind humming through empty windows like ghosts murmuring their sorrows. At midday, they came upon the ruins of a mill where a crooked wooden bridge crossed the Red Fork. The water below ran brown and sluggish. Edric halted, raising a hand. "Stay sharp," he murmured. "The Frey lands begin past this bridge, and where Frys linger, trouble follows." His sergeant, a wiry man named Tom Heddle, spat over the side. "Aye, trouble and treachery both. I've seen crows fly straighter than those curs." Lancel said nothing. He stared into the river as if searching for something beneath its surface, or perhaps within himself. Then, in a voice soft but certain, he said, "There are bodies caught in the reeds, Sir Edric." Edric followed his gaze and saw them. 3 corpses, swollen and pale, tangled among the rushes. One wore a soldier's mail, another a child's torn dress. The third bore the remnants of a Frey surcoat, the twin towers blackened with blood. "Gods," Tom muttered. "No grave deep enough to hold them all." Lancel crossed himself. "No grave deep enough for our sins either." They buried the bodies before dusk, though the ground was too wet to take them easily. Edric worked beside his men, hands blistered, sweat stinging his eyes. Lancel knelt at the graveside when it was done, whispering prayers until the stars appeared, pale, uncertain things behind the storm clouds. By nightfall, they reached the shell of a village, its name lost to fire. A few huts still stood, their roofs sagging like old men's backs. Edric ordered a camp made near the well, posting guards along the road. The air was thick with mist, and the silence pressed close. As the men settled to meager rations, Edric joined Lancel beside the dying embers of the fire. The night priest was staring into the flames, his lips moving in quiet prayer. "You've not spoken a word of what awaits us," Edric said after a time. "I'm told you go to treat with Lord Walder Frey. I'd call that a fool's errand if I weren't sworn to see it done." Lancel's gaze lifted. His eyes, pale as old gold, held a strange calm. "I go where the faith commands," I am to urge Lord Walder to repentance, to confess his part in the slaughter and seek absolution before the stranger takes him." Edric almost laughed. "You'll find more mercy in the river than in the twins, my lord." "Then may the seven grant me strength to drown well," Lancel said simply. Edric studied him. The lean face, the hollow cheeks, the haunted look that no prayer could wash away. He'd heard the tales, how Lancel had lain with Queen Cersei, how he'd betrayed his king and kin both, and now he sought redemption among the ruins. "You truly think the gods will forgive what's been done?" Edric asked, half to himself. "I do not ask forgiveness," Lancel said quietly. "Only the courage to face what waits." A sound broke the stillness, a soft crack of a twig beyond the firelight. Tom's voice called from the dark. "Sir, riders, coming up the road!" Edric rose at once, drawing steel. The men scrambled to arms, the firelight glinting off dented mail. Shapes moved through the fog, 6, 7, maybe more. No banners, only torches. "Hold!" Edric shouted. "Who goes there?" A woman's voice answered, low and cold. "Travelers, same as you, Sir Knight, though our road runs darker." The riders came into view, hard-faced men and women in scavenged armor, their mounts thin and ragged. At their head rode a hooded woman, her cloak the color of storm clouds. In her hand gleamed a sword as old as rust. Edric saw the glimmer of no sigil, yet something in her bearing made his pulse quicken. "Lay down your steel," she said. "We have no wish for blood tonight." Edric kept his sword raised. "You'll forgive me if I don't take that on faith." The woman's hood fell back then, and every man present went still. Her face was pale as death, her throat marred by a jagged scar, a woman long dead and yet not. "Faith?" she whispered, her voice like wind through a crypt. "No, Sir Knight, only vengeance." Lancel staggered to his feet, clutching his holy book to his breast. "By the seven." But the dead woman, Lady Stoneheart, raised her blade, and the night swallowed the rest. The wind hissed through the dead village like a living thing, carrying with it the smell of damp ashes and old blood. Torches flickered in the mist, casting long, trembling shadows across the broken walls. Sir Edric Piper stood frozen, sword half raised, eyes fixed upon the figure before him. Lady Stoneheart, the ghost of Catelyn Stark, risen from the river's black embrace. Her hair hung in matted ropes about her pale face, her lips blue as winter's night. When she tried to speak, the sound was like tearing cloth, a dry whisper forced through the ruin of her throat. Her eyes, though, spoke clearly enough, hollow and pitiless. Behind her, a dozen outlaws formed a grim half-circle, men and women once sworn to justice, now bound to vengeance. The Brotherhood without banners, though they bore no banners now, only the nooses at their belts. "Lady Stoneheart," Edric said slowly, lowering his blade a fraction, "you have no quarrel with us. We ride under peace, in the name of the faith." One of the outlaws laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "The faith? Tell that to the Frey's butchered bride, Sir Knight. Tell it to the corpses in the river." Lancel stepped forward, his thin frame trembling. "I am Sir Lancel of House Lannister. I come not in pride, but in penance. We seek Lord Walder Frey to beg his repentance for—" At that name, the dead woman's head tilted slightly, like a wolf scenting prey. She raised a gloved hand, and her followers moved as one, surrounding the small party in a ring of drawn steel. "Repentance," growled a tall man with a blackened eye patch, the remnants of Thoris's flame-scorched brotherhood. "The Lord of the Crossing gave no repentance when he slaughtered the Starks beneath his roof. His blood will be the offering she seeks." Lancel's voice wavered but did not break. Then let me carry her message so that he may answer for it before the gods. The hooded men shifted uncertainly. For a heartbeat, it seemed his words might temper the storm. But then Lady Stoneheart stepped closer, her movements slow and jerking, as though her limbs remembered death. She stopped before Lancel, her face inches from his, and reached up to trace the chain of the 7 about his neck. Her fingers were cold and stiff. When she spoke, it was scarcely more than a hiss. "Lannister." Lancel flinched as though struck. "Aye," he whispered, "and sinner." Something passed between them then, not forgiveness, not even rage, recognition perhaps of a shared ruin. Then she turned from him, her ruined lips curling into something that might once have been a smile. "Take them," rasped the tall man with the patch. Steel flashed. Edric shouted for his men to hold formation, but chaos broke like thunder. The outlaws surged in, and the campfire was kicked apart, casting sparks into the fog. Swords clashed, and horses screamed. Edric parried a blow, drove his attacker back, then turned to see Tom Heddle dragged from his saddle. Lancel tried to flee, clutching his holy book to his breast, but a whip coiled about his arm and tore him from his horse. He hit the mud with a cry. Edric fought to reach him, cutting down one outlaw, then another, until his blade caught against a tree trunk slick with rain. A heavy club struck his helm, and stars burst across his vision. The next thing he knew, the fight was over. They had been taken. The outlaws bound their hands and dragged them to the old sept at the edge of the village. Its roof collapsed, its statues headless. Within, the air was thick with damp and decay. Candles guttered upon an altar where the mother's face had been hacked away. Lady Stoneheart stood before that ruined altar, her shadow long and wavering in the candlelight. The captives knelt before her, Edric, Tom, and 5 of their remaining men. Lancel knelt apart, his lips moving in prayer. The man with the patch, Lem they called him, strode forward. "These men serve the Frys," he growled. "That's a lie," Tom spat. "We serve House Piper, loyal to River Run." "River Run's fallen," Lem snarled. "Its lord rots in a dungeon, its banners burned. You serve corpses and ghosts now, same as we." Lady Stoneheart raised her hand again, and silence fell. Her eyes swept over the prisoners, pausing upon Edric. Slowly, she reached into her cloak and drew forth a scrap of cloth, pale blue and silver, stitched with the sigil of House Piper. It was torn, blood-stained, and old. Edric's heart sank. He knew it at once. It was his father's banner, lost when the Freys sacked their lands after the Red Wedding. "She knows you," Lem said grimly. "Knows your house stood with the Tullys. That makes you no friend of the Lannisters." Lady Stoneheart's gaze moved to Lancel, who knelt unmoving, eyes downcast. The firelight danced across his face, illuminating the faint scar where once an arrow had pierced him, the wound that had driven him to the faith. "Mercy," Lancel murmured. "If you are what remains of Lady Catelyn Stark, then know this. I have come to seek justice, not to escape it." The dead woman's ruined throat worked as if trying to speak. At last, a rasp escaped. "Confess." Lancel bowed his head. "I confess I loved where I should not have loved. I confess I betrayed my king. I confess I lived when others better than I perished." His voice broke. "If you seek my life, take it, but let these others go free." Lady Stoneheart did not move. Edric struggled against his bonds. "He's no friend to the Freys, nor am I. We only ride to end the killing, to bring peace to what's left of the Riverlands." The Brotherhood murmured among themselves. Some spat at the word peace. Others looked uncertain. The rain drummed on the shattered roof, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled. At last, Lem turned to his lady. "Shall we hang them, my lady?" Stoneheart's fingers brushed the banner in her hand. Then she raised her pale eyes toward Lancel, and the faintest sound came from her ruined lips. A whisper, faint but unmistakable. Temptation. The word hung in the air like a curse. She turned away then, vanishing into the dark of the sept. The Brotherhood followed her, torches flickering, leaving their prisoners alone in the cold. Edric looked to Lancel. What did she mean? Lancel's eyes shone in the candlelight. That the gods, or whatever walks in her place, have not yet decided whether to damn us or spare us. Outside, the thunder grew louder, and the rain fell harder. Somewhere beyond the hills, the Red Fork whispered its endless lament, and the night crept closer. The storm came down hard that night, drumming against the roof of the ruined sept until the sound was like 100 fists pounding in anger. The candles burned low, and the cold crept in, biting through soaked clothes and bruised flesh alike. Edric could scarcely feel his fingers through the rope binding his wrists, but his mind raced, searching for a path through the darkness that hemmed them in. His men lay close beside him, silent and weary. Tom Heddle's face was streaked with blood. A gash across his temple had dried to black. Beyond them, Lancel Lannister still knelt before the shattered altar, his head bowed, lips moving in ceaseless prayer. The pages of his holy book were damp, the ink running like tears. For a long while, only the rain spoke. At last, Tom stirred. "They'll kill us come morning," he muttered, voice hoarse. "Hang us in the trees like crows. I've seen their kind before." Edric kept his voice low. "Not if I can stop it." Tom gave a bitter laugh. "Stop it? With what? Words? You saw her, Edric. Saw it. That's no lady of flesh and blood. That's death, walking." Edric said nothing. His thoughts churned. He remembered the look in Lady Stoneheart's eyes. Not madness, but purpose. The kind that drives men to cruelty and calls it justice. Yet beneath that horror, he had glimpsed something else, a wound that would never heal. "She didn't strike us down," he said after a time. "There's reason in that." "Reason?" Tom spat. "Maybe she just wants to watch us squirm first." Lancel lifted his head then, turning toward them. His eyes seemed almost luminous in the gloom. "No," he said softly. "She waits because she doubts. She has become the thing she once fought against. Vengeance unending. Perhaps she fears what remains of her soul." Edric frowned. "You speak of her as if she were still alive." "In a way, she is." Lancel's voice was faint but steady. "The gods grant no rest to those who die in betrayal. Her spirit clings to its purpose, though her heart no longer beats. I have seen such in the faith's oldest texts. Those who cannot forgive are bound to the world by their hatred, till that hatred consumes them. And us with it," Tom muttered. The door creaked open then, and torchlight spilled across the floor. A figure stepped in, a young woman wrapped in a torn cloak, her face half hidden by a fall of dark hair. She bore a tray of bread and a pitcher of water. The smell of it made Edric's stomach twist with hunger. She set the tray before them and spoke in a low voice. "Eat. You'll need your strength." Edric peered up at her. "You're one of them?" "I was," she said. "Once." Her eyes flicked toward the altar. "Not all who follow her do so gladly." Lancel studied her face. "Why help us then?" The woman hesitated. "Because I remember who Lady Stark was before she died. She would have shown mercy." Her gaze lingered on Lancel Septon's chain. "And because you are a man of the faith, if there's still light left in her, Perhaps your words might reach it." Then, without another word, she turned and slipped out into the rain. They ate in silence. The bread was coarse, the water muddy, but it kept them alive. When the storm eased toward dawn, Edric had worked one of his wrists nearly free of its binding. He hid the motion beneath the folds of his cloak, waiting. At first light, the outlaws returned. Lem led them grim as ever. "On your feet," he barked. "She's decided." They were dragged outside into the gray morning. Mist lay thick over the ruins, curling like smoke among the stones. The air smelled of wet earth and death. Lady Stoneheart waited beneath the great weirwood that loomed at the edge of the village, a twisted, ancient thing whose bark was pale as bone. The red leaves stirred faintly, whispering secrets. Before her stood 3 gallows, ropes swaying gently in the wind. Lancel crossed himself. "Mother have mercy." Edric's jaw tightened. If she meant to kill us, she'd have done it already. Lem shoved him forward. "Best not test her patience, Sir Knight." The captives were forced to kneel in the mud before the tree. The Brotherhood gathered around, their faces drawn and hard. Among them, Edric glimpsed the woman from the night before, standing apart, her expression unreadable. Lady Stoneheart raised her hand, and the murmurs ceased. The only sound was the rain dripping from the branches. She stepped closer, the hem of her cloak dragging through the mire. From within her sleeve, she drew a small locket, a child's trinket of silver and blue. She held it out toward Edric. "River Run," she rasped, the word torn from her ruined throat. Edric stared at the locket. "Yes," he said carefully. "My father fought for River Run, for your son." Her eyes burned like cold fire. "Your father is dead." "He is," Edric said, voice low. "But not by your hand. He fell defending his home from Frey men." Something flickered across her face, the faintest tremor gone as soon as it came. Then she turned her gaze to Lancel. "Lannister," she hissed. Lancel bowed his head. "I know what my name means to you." He raised his eyes and met her stare without fear. "But I have come to do what no other Lannister will. I will see Walder Frey kneel before the gods. If you kill me here, you kill that chance. And his crimes go unpunished." For a long, terrible moment, no one moved. Then Lem stepped forward. "He lies, my lady. They all lie. Let their tongues wag from their necks if they've truth to speak." The woman with the dark hair interjected sharply. "Let them prove their word, at least. If the Lannister means to bring Frey to judgment, then let him do it." The Brotherhood murmured, divided. Stoneheart's eyes flicked from face to face, then back to Lancel. Her hand trembled as it rose to the rope around her own throat, the scar that had ended her mortal life. She touched it, then lowered her arm slowly. Finally, she gave a single nod. "Trial," Lem muttered, uncertain. She turned and vanished into the mist once more, her followers scattering after her like shadows dissolving at dawn. The woman untied the ropes from Edric's hands. "She's given you a chance," she whispered. "Don't waste it." Lancel swayed on his feet, pale and exhausted. "A chance," he echoed. "Or a test." Edric caught his arm, steadying him. "Whichever it is, we'll face it together. We'll see this done. For your faith, and for her vengeance both." Thunder rolled again in the distance, and the weirwood's red leaves stirred above them like drops of blood on snow. Beyond the river, somewhere in the gray north, the twins awaited, and with them, Lord Walder Frey, old and unrepentant. Edric looked out into the mist, jaw set. If we are to walk among ghosts, then let us bring them peace, or join them trying. The wind sighed through the trees, carrying no answer, only the whisper of rain and the faint, unending murmur of the river that had seen too much death. The morning broke cold and colorless, the sky the hue of old iron. Mist drifted over the red fork, hiding the far bank from sight. The world seemed emptied of sound save for the slow churn of water and the creak of saddle leather as Edric and Lancel rode north. They had been freed at dawn, though freedom was too grand a word for what had passed. Lady Stoneheart's followers had given them back their horses, their steel, and enough bread for 2 days' ride. Yet the look in those men's eyes spoke plainly. They were not free, only watched from afar. The Brotherhood had ways of learning if promises were broken. Edric's men rode behind them, weary and silent. Of the 12 who had set out from Pink Maiden, only 7 remained. Tom Heddle rode at his lord's side, muttering curses under his breath. "Trial," she said. Tom grumbled. "A trial of what? Of our necks, most like. The Freys will flay us the moment we ride through their gate." "Then we'll not ride through their gate," Edric replied. "Not yet." Lancel lifted his hood against the wind. "You intend to hide from Lord Walder's men? To find a way to him that doesn't end with us strung on his walls?" Edric said, "The twins have more holes than a fisher's net. We'll use one." He spoke with confidence he did not feel. The Freys were too many, their castle too well guarded. To come before Walder Frey as a supplicant was to place one's head upon the block. Yet there was no other road. Stoneheart's command was clear. A trial, she had said, and Edric understood. They were to deliver justice or die in the attempt. By noon they reached a ruined hamlet, no more than 3 cottages and a burnt inn. Crows scattered from the roofs as they approached. Inside the inn's blackened shell, they made a small fire, enough to warm the bread and dry their cloaks. Lancel sat apart, staring into the flames, his holy book open across his knees. His hands shook slightly as he turned the pages. Edric studied him. "You're not afraid," he said quietly, "or you hide it well." Lancel looked up. "I am afraid of many things, but not death. I've worn that cloak before." "Then why come here?" Tom demanded. "Why seek the Freys at all? You could have hidden in the septs, lived out your days in prayer." Lancel's gaze did not waver. "Because the stranger waits for all men, but before he takes me, I would see some measure of right return to the world I helped ruin." The words hung heavy in the air. Edric felt a flicker of something he had not known since the war began. Respect. When the fire burned low, they mounted again and rode on. By dusk, the mist had thickened, and the river's path curved toward the twins. 2 towers rose from the gloom ahead, like jagged teeth biting through the fog. Even from leagues away, their shape was unmistakable. Lancel drew rein atop a low hill. "There," he said softly, "the seat of betrayal." Edric nodded grimly. "We'll make camp before dark. The Freys' scouts ride this ground." They dismounted beside a tangle of willows, their roots gnarled and half submerged in the riverbank. The men built no fire that night. The chill crept deep into their bones, but none dared risk the smoke. When the moon rose, pale and cold, Edric kept watch beside Lancel. The priest knight was whispering verses under his breath, the same line repeated over and over. "Mercy belongs to those who turn away from wrath." At last Edric said, "Do you believe that?" "I must," Lancel replied, "else all this—" He gestured toward the sleeping men. "The ruined land, the river itself, means nothing." Edric leaned back against a stone. "And if mercy fails? Then vengeance will finish what mercy cannot," said a new voice. both men started. From the shadows stepped a figure. The young woman from Stoneheart's camp, the one who had brought them food. She moved quietly, though her cloak was soaked with rain. Edric's hand went to his sword. "You followed us." "I was sent," she said, "to see that you keep your word." "Watcher or warden?" Edric asked. "Both." She looked toward the towers across the river. "The lady will have justice. If you betray that cause, she will know." Lancel regarded her calmly. "And if we succeed, then her spirit may rest." The woman hesitated. "She was once merciful, you know. Before they took her son, her daughters, her very life. She loved fiercely. That love burns still. But it burns cold now." Lancel closed his book and rose. "Tell her this. Vengeance is no offering the gods accept gladly. If she wishes peace, she must let the living seek it for her." The woman's eyes flicked between them. "Say it to her yourself," she said. "If you live to return." She turned and vanished into the mist as swiftly as she had come. The next morning dawned gray again, the towers looming closer. Edric led his men down to the shallows where a ferry crossing once stood. The ferry itself was gone, burned likely in the war, but half a dozen old boats lay overturned among the reeds. With a little work, they made one seaworthy enough to bear them across. The river was sluggish, but deep. The oars creaked, the current tugging at their course. Edric kept his eyes on the northern bank, half expecting arrows to hiss from the fog. None came. When the keel scraped against mud, they dragged the boat ashore and climbed the slope. A small gatehouse stood ahead, manned by 2 guards in Frey livery. They stared as Edric approached, water dripping from his cloak. "What business brings you here?" one demanded. "Sir Edric Piper, on Faith's command," Edric said. "We bring word for Lord Walder." The guards exchanged looks. The old lord doesn't receive travelers unbidden. Lancel stepped forward, drawing back his hood. His pale hair gleamed in the weak light. "He will receive me. Tell him Sir Lancel Lannister of the Faith Militant seeks audience concerning his sins." The guards gaped, uncertain. At last one turned and vanished into the gatehouse. Edric watched the other man closely. "Tell your lord we come in peace," he said. "And tell him peace is a rare gift these days." The guard said nothing. Moments later, the first man returned. "Lord Walder will see you," he said. "But he warns, he has little patience for sermons." Lancel smiled faintly. "So do the gods." They were led across the bridge into the twins. The stones beneath their boots were slick with mist. The towers loomed on either side, their windows black as watching eyes. Edric felt the weight of every step, as though ghosts walked beside him. The slain Starks, the butchered bannermen, all crying out from the halls. At the bridge's far end, Frey men stood waiting, lean, pale, and cruel-eyed. Behind them, a thin old figure hunched in a wheeled chair, wrapped in furs. His mouth was twisted in a smile that never reached his eyes. "Sir Lancel Lannister," croaked Lord Walder Frey, his voice as dry as parchment. "And a piper pup. What brings such fine company to my humble hall?" Lancel bowed stiffly. "Your soul, my lord, and the question of what it's worth." The old man's laughter echoed off the stone, brittle as glass. "Oh, I think you'll find it's worth more than yours, boy." And so began the trial that none of them would forget. The great hall of the twins was colder than the river outside, though fires burned in both hearths. Smoke curled against the rafters, thick and stale, carrying the stench of grease and damp fur. Above the high table hung the twin tower banner, Its pale blue faded to gray. Beneath it sat Lord Walder Frey, old as rot and twice as bitter. He regarded Lancel and Edric with a predator's amusement, his thin hands clutching the arms of his chair. The old man's flesh hung loose over brittle bones, his eyes sharp despite the sagging folds around them. To his left stood his sons and grandsons, lined like wolves at a kill, their armor polished but their hearts long rusted. "So," Walder croaked, his voice carrying over the hall, "the faith sends me a crippled lion and a lordling whose castle burned to cinders. Tell me, which of you will preach and which will kneel?" Lancel did not flinch. "Neither, my lord. I have come to speak of sin." A ripple of laughter ran through the Freys. One of the younger men, a thick-set brute with a scar across his nose, slammed a fist on the table. "Sin? From a Lannister's mouth?" Edric's hand tightened on his sword hilt. "He comes under the faith's protection. Show respect." "Respect?" Walder rasped, wheezing as he laughed. "Do you think I care for the faith's games? They prayed for the young wolf too, I recall, and see what good it did him." His eyes glittered like old coins. "But speak then, holy knight. Let us hear what wisdom drips from a Lannister's tongue." Lancel stepped forward, his chain of the seven glinting in the torchlight. "You butchered men who had shared your bread. You broke the sacred laws of guest right. You desecrated a covenant older than any crown. I come to demand confession, that your soul might yet be spared the stranger's wrath." Silence fell across the hall, heavy as storm clouds. The laughter died. Even the fire seemed to still. Walder's gaze hardened to flint. "Spared?" he said softly. "You dare speak of sparing me? I am Lord of the Crossing, boy. I've buried kings and outlived their killers. I need no priest's pardon." "You will," Lancel said, "sooner than you think." A murmur ran through the Freys. Edric felt the air thicken with danger. Walder leaned forward in his chair, his voice dropping to a whisper sharp as a dagger. "You come to accuse me in my own hall. You, a Lannister, the same house that armed me, fed me, promised me the king's favor for what was done? If sin there was, it was shared, and I would do it again." Lancel met his stare unblinking. "Then you are damned." The old man's laughter broke the silence like shattering glass. "Damned?" He slapped the arm of his chair. "Boy, I was damned long before you were born. You think the gods care for the likes of me? They turned their backs on this land long ago. I only learned to live without them." Edric stepped forward, unable to hold his tongue. "And yet you still fear them. Else why build your hall like a fortress against the night?" Walder's head turned, his eyes narrowing. "Mind your tongue, piper whelp, or I'll have it nailed to my door." He motioned to his guards, but before they could move, Lancel raised a hand. "If you shed more blood tonight, my lord, you'll finish what began at the wedding, and the ghosts that haunt your river will never rest." Walder froze, his gaze flicking toward the windows where the wind moaned faintly through the cracks. For a heartbeat, the mask of cruelty slipped, and something older, colder stirred behind his eyes. Then he sneered. "Ghosts? Let them come. I've lived among them for years." Lancel drew a deep breath. "Then you'll meet them soon enough." He turned to leave, but the heavy doors of the hall slammed shut. The Freys shifted uneasily. Outside, thunder rolled, though no storm had been seen on the ride-in. Walder's eldest son, Ryman, stepped forward, hand on his sword. "You'll not walk out of here, priest. Not after those words." Lancel's voice was calm. "If you kill us, you'll only speed your own ruin. The Brotherhood without banners watches these lands. They know your crimes and they will not rest. Ryman's lip curled. Outlaws and corpses. More alive than you by half, Edric said coldly. The hall erupted into shouting, threats and curses echoing off the stone. Swords rasped from scabbards. For a moment, chaos loomed, but then Walder's frail voice rose above it all. Enough! The old man's hand trembled, yet the room obeyed. He looked down at Lancel with eyes like ice over deep water. You think to frighten me with your holy talk? The world belongs to those who take it, not those who pray for it. Remember that, priest. Lancel inclined his head. Then I pity you, my lord, for soon you'll find there's nothing left to take. He turned again, and this time the guards did not move to stop him. The phrase parted in uneasy silence as he strode from the hall. Edric followed close behind, his hand never leaving his sword. Outside, the sky had turned the color of ash. The wind carried a faint sound, distant, mournful, like the cry of a horn. The men on the battlements looked at one another uneasily. Lancel paused at the foot of the bridge. He's already condemned, he said quietly. I saw it in his eyes, but justice must still be done. Edric looked back toward the hall, its torches flickering like dying stars. And how do you mean to bring justice to a man like that? The same way he brought ruin to others, Lancel said, by blood and reckoning. That night, they camped in the shadow of the bridge, the towers looming above like sentinels carved from stone. None slept easily. The air was heavy, the river restless. From somewhere upriver came the echo of hooves, though no riders were seen. Near dawn, the mist thickened again, coiling low and white over the water. Lancel knelt by the bank, his reflection wavering. The river remembers, he murmured. Edric turned sharply. What did you say? Before Lancel could answer, a whispering drifted through the fog, soft at first, then clearer, the sound of weeping, of voices half drowned. Shapes moved beneath the surface, shadows of men and women clutching at the reeds. Tom gasped and stumbled back, crossing himself. 7 save us. But Lancel only bowed his head. They have come. The mist parted, and upon the opposite bank stood figures cloaked in gray, men and women, hooded, silent. At their center stood the woman Edric had seen before, her eyes dark as storm clouds. The lady has spoken, she called across the water. Walder Frey's judgment begins at dawn. Then the fog swallowed her whole, and the river was still once more. Edric looked to Lancel. What have you done? Not I, said Lancel, rising. The dead. The wind shifted, carrying the faint toll of a bell from some distant sept. The sound mingled with the murmur of the river until it was impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. Dawn would come soon, and with it, the reckoning. The dawn crept over the riverlands, like a blade drawn slow from its sheath. Mist still blanketed the lowlands, turning every tree into a pale ghost, every shadow into something watching. Edric woke to the hollow cry of crows wheeling over the water. The air was heavy with the smell of rain and mud and something else, the scent of rot carried by the current. The camp was silent. His men moved about in uneasy quiet, saddling horses with shaking hands, whispering prayers under their breath. Tom Heddle crouched beside the dying embers of the fire, staring into the smoke as if reading omens there. Sir, he said softly when Edric approached, there's something wrong with the river. Look. Edric followed his gaze. The Red Fork flowed sluggishly past, but the color of it seemed darker now, the surface swirling as though stirred by unseen hands, and in that sluggish current drifted shapes, pale, tattered things that might once have been men. Bodies, he realized. Dozens of them, some swollen, others stripped to bone by the fish. Their faces were gone, but their armor bore the sigil of the twins' towers, blackened and torn. Fries. Lancel knelt at the riverbank, his hands clasped in prayer. His lips moved soundlessly, his face as pale as the corpses that floated by. 7 above, Tom whispered. Is this her doing? Stonehearts? Or something worse, Edric murmured. Before he could speak further, the sound of hooves broke through the mist. Riders approached from the north, a dozen or more, their armor dull, their banners limp in the damp air. At their head rode the dark-haired woman who had appeared to them before, her cloak snapping in the wind. Sir Edric Piper, she called, reining in her horse. Sir Lancel Lannister, the lady waits. Lancel rose, his expression unreadable. Where? In the halls you left behind. Edric stiffened. The twins? She nodded once. Justice comes for the Lord of the Crossing. You will bear witness. Edric's men exchanged uneasy glances. Tom spat into the mud. Justice, she calls it. I've seen their justice before. It ends with ropes and corpses swinging. Still, there was no turning back. The Brotherhood's riders surrounded them, grim and silent. Together they rode through the mist toward the bridge. The sun was rising now, a thin red line along the horizon, and it stained the river with the color of blood. The gates of the twins stood open when they arrived, not guarded, not even barred. A strange stillness clung to the place. Inside, the courtyards were empty save for the crows that hopped along the walls, tearing at something Edric did not look too closely at. They dismounted at the steps of the great hall. The woman gestured for them to follow. Lancel hesitated only a moment before climbing the steps, his hand resting upon his holy book. Edric followed, sword drawn but held low. The doors creaked open under the woman's touch, and what lay beyond made the breath catch in Edric's throat. The hall was dark but for a few flickering torches. The long tables had been overturned, the floor slick with wine and something thicker. Bodies lay scattered everywhere. Frey men in their armor, their faces pale, their throats cut clean. A feast of death. At the far end of the hall sat Lord Walder Frey, slumped in his chair, eyes staring wide and empty. His throat had been opened from ear to ear. A goblet of wine rested beside his withered hand, still half full. The woman's voice echoed softly. The lady's justice is swift. Lancel moved forward, stopping before the dead lord. There is no justice in this, he said, only vengeance. From the shadows at the edge of the hall, a figure stepped forth, tall, cloaked, the familiar ruin of a face hidden beneath her hood. Lady Stoneheart. The air grew colder as she came forward. Her steps were soundless, her movements slow, deliberate, as if her body obeyed only through force of will. She looked down upon Walder Frey's corpse and then lifted her gaze to Lancel. Her eyes burned like coals in a dying fire. You have your confession, she rasped, voice like dry leaves scraping stone. And your faith. Lancel stood unflinching. My faith forbids murder done in the god's name. Stoneheart tilted her head. The gods were silent when my son was slain. They are silent no longer, Lancel said. This was not their work. You damn yourself further with every drop of blood. A whispering ran through the hall. The Brotherhood, emerging from the shadows, their faces half lit by torchlight. Some looked defiant, others uneasy, as if Lancel's words had touched a nerve. Edric stepped forward. It's done, my lady. The old man's dead, his house broken. The river will remember his name with shame enough. Let it end here. Stoneheart's ruined lips twisted, the faintest hint of something that might once have been sorrow. She raised her hand, and a rope unfurled from the rafters above, swinging gently in the torchlight. "There is no end," she whispered, "only reckoning." Her gaze fixed on Lancel. Lannister. The Brotherhood moved closer. Tom drew his sword, but Edric stopped him with a glance. Lancel did not back away. "If you believe this will bring you peace," he said softly, "then do what you must. But know this, no rope can free you from what haunts you." For a moment, the hall was utterly still. The torches flickered. The crows outside cawed as though mocking the silence. Then slowly, Stoneheart lowered her hand. "No," she said at last. The word cracked and hollow. "Not yet." She turned away from them, her cloak swirling like a shadow of smoke. "Go," she rasped. "Tell the world that Walder Frey has paid his debt. But tell them, too, that the debt is not yet settled." Lancel bowed his head. "As you will, my lady." The Brotherhood parted to let them pass. Edric led his men from the hall, the sound of their boots echoing in the emptiness. Behind them, the dead lord sat in eternal silence, and the woman who had once been Catelyn Stark watched from her place among the torches, a ghost unbound. Outside, the mist had begun to lift. The first clear light of morning touched the towers, turning their stone to pale gold. Edric drew a long breath. "It's over," Tom said. "No," Edric murmured. "It's only begun." They crossed the bridge in silence. Behind them, the crows took flight, black wings beating against the pale sky. As they rode south, the wind shifted, carrying with it a faint sound. Not weeping, not laughter, but something between the two. It might have been the river. It might have been the voice of the dead. Lancel looked back only once. "The gods grant mercy to those who seek it," he said quietly. "But what becomes of those who cannot?" Edric had no answer. The world of men was broken, and the gods, if they still watched, had turned their faces away. Yet somewhere beneath that cold, empty sky, life still stirred. And perhaps, he thought, that was reason enough to keep riding. The road south from the Twins wound through a country of ghosts. Burnt villages stood hollow and silent, their chimneys black against the pale sky. Trees leaned over the path like mourners, their branches heavy with mist. The war had ended, the bards sang, but Edric Piper saw no peace, only the emptiness left when vengeance had spent itself. Their company was smaller now. 5 men remained of the 12 who had left Pink Maiden. The rest had fallen to Frey steel or Stoneheart's ropes. They rode in silence, the hooves of their weary mounts squelching in the mud. Lancel kept to himself, hood drawn low, his lips moving in quiet prayer. On the second evening, they made camp beside the ruins of an old sept. Its walls had half collapsed, and moss grew thick between the stones. The statues of the 7 lay broken, faces smashed beyond recognition. Edric found a half-charred pew and fed it to the fire, watching the flames lick at the splintered wood. Tom Heddle crouched beside him, gnawing on a strip of dried meat. "You think she'll come for us next?" he asked. "Who?" "The lady," Tom said. "Stoneheart. We saw what she did at the Twins. You can't tell me she'll stop there. The Freys were only the beginning." Edric stared into the fire. "She's no lady now, only a storm wearing a woman's skin. And storms don't stop till they've spent themselves." Lancel looked up from where he knelt in the shadows. "Vengeance is never spent," he said softly. "It devours until nothing remains." Tom snorted. "You'd know, would you? Lannisters have been feeding that fire for years." Lancel did not rise to the bait. He only whispered, "And we've burned for it. A silence fell. The fire cracked. Somewhere beyond the ruined walls, an owl called, and the wind stirred the grass with a whisper like breath. Edric spoke at last. "You saw her face, Tom. Whatever she once was, she's not of this world anymore. The dead walk in these lands, and they remember every betrayal. That's what war has made of us." The next morning brought fog thick enough to drown a man. They followed the river road by instinct alone, their world reduced to the sound of hooves and the damp smell of the mist. Toward midday, they heard a bell tolling, faint, slow, and sorrowful. They came upon a small town huddled along the river's bend. Half its houses had been burned, but life lingered there still. A few villagers moved among the ruins, their faces hollow, their eyes wary. A septon in gray robes stood beside a rough-hewn altar, tolling the bell with a hand that shook. When he saw the riders, he paused and called out, "Peace be with you, travelers. Have you come seeking shelter?" Edric dismounted. "Shelter, and perhaps a bit of news." The old man studied them closely. "You're no Fries." "Do we look it?" Tom said dryly. The septon smiled faintly. "Then you're welcome enough. There's little here but ashes, though. The lady's work has been busy in these parts." Lancel frowned. "The lady?" The septon nodded. "A ghost, they say. A woman with a scarred throat and eyes like frost. Her followers pass through by night, and when they leave, another fray hangs from the trees. Some say she's a spirit of vengeance sent by the mother herself. Others say she's a curse that no prayer can lift." He turned toward the river, where 3 bodies swung from a gallows tree, their boots barely touching the water. Lancel's face tightened. "The mother does not send curses." The septon regarded him with weary eyes. "Perhaps not, but she does not stop them either." They rested that night in the ruined inn. Rain began to fall after dark, drumming on the roof. Edric lay awake, listening to the rhythm of it, his mind restless. When he closed his eyes, he saw again the Hall of the Twins, the dead lord with his throat cut, the pale woman standing in the shadows. Near midnight, a whisper broke the quiet. "Sir Edric." He sat up, hand on his sword. It was the septon, standing in the doorway, his lantern casting a dim glow. "Something you should see," the old man said. Outside, the rain had stopped. The fog had returned, thick and white. The septon led him to the river bank, where the gallows tree stood. The bodies were gone. Only the ropes remained, swaying gently in the mist. "They were there at dusk," the septon murmured. "Now they've vanished. The villagers say she takes them, the lady, claims the river for her own." Edric felt a chill crawl down his spine. "Why show me this?" The septon looked at him sadly. "Because you carry the look of a man walking the same road. Beware where it leads." He turned and left Edric alone with the mist and the whispering of the river. When morning came, the ropes still swayed, but of the bodies there was no sign. Edric said nothing as they rode on, though the image gnawed at him. By afternoon, they reached the fork where the road split, one path leading south toward the ruins of Seagard, the other east toward Harrenhal. Lancel reined in his horse. "I will go east," he said. Edric turned in surprise. "East? There's nothing there but smoke and ghosts." "Then it's where I belong," Lancel replied. "The faith militant rebuilds its halls in King's Landing. I must bring word of what's been done, and warn them of what still walks the Riverlands." "You'll never reach the city alone," Edric said. "The roads are broken." "I'm not afraid," Lancel said. "I've already faced death once." Tom snorted. "Aye, and next time she'll be less merciful." But Edric only nodded. Go then. The stranger walks with you, but so does your purpose. Tell them the riverlands bleed still, and no crown can stop it." Lancel offered his hand, and Edric clasped it. "You have a good heart, Sir Edric Piper. Guard it well, or the world will take it from you." Then he rode east into the mist until his figure was swallowed by it. Edric watched him go, unease coiling in his chest. The river murmured behind him, low and restless. When he turned south once more, he saw a shape on the far bank, a woman in gray, standing still as stone, her hair hanging wet about her face. She did not move, did not call out, yet he felt her gaze upon him, cold and unyielding. Tom followed his stare and paled. "Seven save us. She's everywhere." But when Edric blinked, the woman was gone. Only the mist remained, curling like smoke across the water. He said nothing. He only spurred his horse onward, the sound of the river fading behind him like a heartbeat. And in its whisper, he thought he heard a voice. Faint, broken, but certain. The dead remember. The days that followed passed in a blur of gray skies and endless mud. The riverland stretched before Edric Piper like a wound that would not heal. Smoke rose from the ruins of distant villages, black against the horizon, and the stench of decay clung to the wind. He had thought himself numb to it all by now. The corpses, the silence, the hollow faces of the living. But still his heart ached at every sight of what the war had left behind. They rode south toward Seagard, though there was little left to find there. The Freys had burned much in their retreat, and where their fire had not reached, bandits had taken root like weeds among the ashes. Edric's men spoke little. Their voices carried uneasily through the mist, as though afraid to draw notice from whatever shadows followed them. On the fourth day, they came upon a battlefield long abandoned. The grass had grown high over the bones, and the armor that lay scattered in the mud had rusted to red. Edric dismounted and knelt beside a broken sword half buried in the soil. Its hilt bore the mark of House Blackwood. He brushed the dirt away with his fingers. "They fought for honor," he murmured. Tom Heddle, standing nearby, spat into the weeds. "And died for it, same as the rest." "Would you rather die for nothing?" Edric asked quietly. Tom hesitated, then shook his head. "No, but I'd rather live long enough to see something worth dying for." The wind sighed across the field, stirring the grass like waves upon the sea. Edric rose, his thoughts heavy. He thought of Lancel riding east, alone into the mist. He wondered if the man yet lived, or if the gods he prayed to had already claimed him. By dusk, they reached a small holdfast along the river. The gate was open, the yard empty save for a few frightened dogs and the carcass of a horse half-eaten by crows. Within the hall, they found a single old man seated by the hearth, wrapped in a tattered cloak of blue and silver. When Edric entered, the man raised his head. "Piper colors," he rasped. "You've the look of your father." Edric started. "You knew him?" "I fought beside him at Fairmarket," the man said. "Sir Garin Piper he was, brave to a fault. I was squire to Lord Blackwood then, lost a hand that day." He lifted the stump of his left arm and gave a wry smile. "A fair trade, some would say." Edric sat beside him. "My father died defending our lands. I've been trying to hold them since." The old man's eyes softened. "A hard burden in hard times. But the Riverlands need men who remember what it means to stand for something." Before Edric could answer, a shout came from outside. Tom burst into the hall, breathless. "Riders! Coming fast! 20, maybe more!" Edric was on his feet at once. "Frey men? Could be. Their banners hidden. but I'd wager my life they aren't friends." The old man rose shakily. "There's a back way through the stables. Go, before they find you here." Edric hesitated. "What of you?" "I've lived too long to run," the man said with a faint smile. "Go." There was no time to argue. Edric and his men slipped out through the rear door, leading their horses into the trees. They had scarcely reached the river's edge when they heard voices behind them. The harsh laughter of men and the clang of steel. The Freys had come. They hid among the reeds as the riders entered the holdfast. Edric watched from the shadows as the old man was dragged into the yard, beaten to his knees. The Frey captain demanded names, asking who had passed through. The old man spat blood and said nothing. Edric's jaw tightened. Every instinct urged him to act, but Tom's hand gripped his arm. "Don't, sir. You can't save him." A blade flashed. The old man fell without a sound. Edric closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the Freys were mounting up, the flames of torches licking at the hall's thatch. The holdfast was burning before they even rode away. When the Freys were gone, Edric crossed the river with his men. None spoke. The fire's reflection danced upon the water, a mockery of dawn. They made camp beneath a line of oaks miles downstream. Edric sat apart from the others, staring into the dark. His sword lay across his knees, its edge dull, its grip worn smooth by years of use. He remembered his father's words. A knight's steel should defend the weak, not avenge them. But what was left to defend when the weak were all but gone? Tom approached and crouched beside him. "You did right, sir. There was no winning that fight." Edric shook his head. "No winning, no losing, only surviving. That's what the world's come to." He looked up at the stars, faint behind the thin veil of cloud. Lancel spoke of faith. He believed the gods still watch us, still weigh our deeds. I want to believe that too. But if they watch, why do they stay silent? Tom had no answer. He threw another stick on the fire. Maybe they're waiting to see what men do without them. That night, Edric dreamed. He stood once more before the river, its waters black and endless. Across it stood Lady Stoneheart, her face hidden by shadow. In her hands she held a sword, his father's sword, and when she spoke, her voice was the whisper of the current. "Justice is a river, Sir Edric. It flows ever downward. You can dam it, you can flee it, but in the end, it finds all men." He tried to speak, but no sound came. The river surged higher, cold around his knees, then his waist, then his chest. When he looked down, he saw faces beneath the surface, Frey faces, and among them, his own. He woke with a cry, heart pounding. The fire had burned to embers. The night was still, save for the soft murmur of the river nearby. Morning came pale and thin. Edric mounted without a word. They rode south again, toward what remained of Seagard. By midday, smoke rose ahead, not the black smoke of war, but the white drift of cooking fires. They approached cautiously and found a camp of small folk beside the road, a ragged gathering of farmers and widows, mothers clutching babes to their chests. When they saw the riders, fear flashed in their eyes. "No harm," Edric called. "We're no Freys." An old woman stepped forward, her back bent but her gaze sharp. "And what are you then? Lords of Ashes?" "Men of the Riverlands," Edric said. "Same as you." "Then tell me, Sir Knight," the woman said. "Where is our justice? The Freys still ride, the wolves are dead, and the lions sit their throne. Who answers for the dead?" Edric had no words. He looked upon their faces, thin, hollow, and hungry. And for the first time he felt truly powerless. One of the children tugged at his cloak. "Is it true?" the boy asked. that a ghost walks the river and hangs the wicked? Edric met the child's wide eyes. "It's true enough," he said softly, "but ghosts don't bring peace. Only men can do that." The boy frowned. "Then why don't they?" Edric wished he knew. As they rode away, he glanced once more at the camp. Smoke rising, faces turned to the wind. He thought again of Lancel, of Stoneheart, of the old man who had refused to kneel. The riverlands bled still, but perhaps the river's flow could yet be changed. He touched the hilt of his sword and whispered, "If justice is a river, then I'll see it cleansed or drown trying." And the wind carried his words away, down the endless stream. Rain fell again as the sun sank behind the marshy horizon, turning the road to a ribbon of black mud. Sir Edric Piper rode with his hood drawn low, his men following in a weary line behind him. The storm had come sudden and fierce, as though the heavens themselves sought to wash the riverlands clean of its sins. Yet the filth of men was not so easily drowned. The thunder rolled long and low. Each flash of lightning revealed the bones of burned farms, the empty shells of villages where only crows now held dominion. The land was dying, though still it clung to life in twisted, stubborn ways. A few stubborn shoots of green forcing their way through the muck, a single candle flickering in a shattered window. By nightfall, they reached a ruined watchtower overlooking a ford of the Red Fork. Once, it had guarded the crossing for the lords of House Mallister, but now its gates hung broken, its stone dark with rain. Still, it was shelter. They made camp within, lighting a fire in the hearth where moss grew between the stones. The warmth was thin, the smoke bitter, but it held the darkness at bay. Tom Heddle stripped off his soaked cloak and muttered, "We're fools for staying in this cursed country. The dead rule it now, sir." Edric said nothing. He stood by the window slit, watching the rain streak down the stones. "We stay," he said at last. "There's word of Frey riders moving south. If we turn back now, we'll lead them straight to the small folks' camp." Tom cursed under his breath. "We can't fight a score of Freys with 5 men." "Then we'll outthink them," Edric replied. "My father used to say a knight's honor means little if his head's on a pike." He turned from the window. The others were silent, their faces drawn and hollow in the firelight. These were not the proud knights of song and story. They were ghosts of war, bound together by duty and what little hope remained. In the corner of the hall, one of the younger men, Robin, whispered a prayer. Edric caught the words. "7 above, guard us from the restless dead." The mention of the dead stirred unease through the company. They had all heard the tales of corpses walking the river banks, of a woman with a torn throat who hanged the guilty. Edric remembered the look in Lady Stoneheart's eyes, pale, unblinking, endless in their cold fury. He had seen many faces of death, but hers was the only one that seemed to remember life. Outside, the storm worsened. The wind keened through the tower's cracks, and the river below roared like an angry beast. Edric tried to sleep, but his dreams were restless. He saw himself standing in the hall of the twins again, the torches guttering, Lord Walder's corpse grinning from his chair. Behind him, the shadows moved, faces half seen, voices whispering of debts unpaid. When he woke, the fire had gone out. The air was cold, the rain still falling. Something stirred outside, the clop of hooves muffled by mud. Edric rose at once, drawing his sword. Tom was already awake, his hand on his dagger. "They've found us," Tom hissed. Edric motioned for silence. He crept to the window slit and peered out. Through the rain, he saw torchlight, 5 riders, maybe 6, crossing the ford. Their cloaks bore no sigil, but the shape of their helmets and the glint of chainmail told him enough. Fries. He turned to his men. To arms, quietly now. They took their places, 2 by the door, 1 by the stairs, Tom beside Edric. The thunder masked the clatter of steel as the Freys dismounted. Moments later, the door creaked open. The first man stepped through, sword drawn. Edric waited until the second followed, then struck. His blade flashed in the dark, and the man fell with a cry. Tom leapt forward, driving his dagger into the throat of another. The hall erupted into chaos, steel against steel, shouts drowned by thunder. A Frey captain, broad-shouldered and cruel-eyed, forced his way inside. "Piper," he bellowed, "I know you're here, you whelp." Edric met him head-on. Their blades clashed, sparks flying. The man fought with brute strength, forcing Edric back step by step. Rain streamed through the open door, mixing with blood on the floor. "Your house is finished," the Frey snarled. "Your name's worth less than the mud you crawl in." Edric parried a blow and drove his pommel into the man's jaw. "Then you'll die in the mud, and I'll keep my name." He struck again, and the Frey captain fell, blood bubbling from his mouth. The remaining riders broke and fled into the storm. When the noise faded, Edric stood panting in the middle of the hall. 3 of his men lay dead. The others gathered their wounded, their faces grim and pale. Tom wiped his blade on a fallen cloak. "That's the end of it, then." Edric shook his head. "No, they'll send more." He stepped to the door and looked out over the river. The rain had slowed to a steady drizzle. Dawn was breaking, pale light creeping through the clouds. On the far bank, something moved, a line of figures standing among the reeds. At first, he thought they were men, but they did not move like men. Their shapes were stiff, their faces pale beneath the mist. The dead. Tom came to stand beside him, his breath catching. "7 save us," he whispered. "They're watching." Edric felt a chill deeper than the rain. The figures did not approach, did not flee. They only stood, silent and waiting, as though judging. Then, through the mist, a shape emerged, a woman cloaked in gray, her hair wet and tangled, her throat a ruin of scarred flesh. Lady Stoneheart. She raised her hand once, slowly, and pointed toward the south. Edric's breath caught. "She wants us to go." Tom crossed himself. "Or she's warning us away. She spared us before," Edric said. "She could have killed us tonight as easily as she killed those Freys." He sheathed his sword. "No. She's showing us something." The figures on the far bank began to fade with the mist, until only the river remained, calm now, its surface smooth as glass. Edric turned back to his men. "We ride south. Whatever waits there, it's tied to her, and to this land." Tom frowned. "You mean to chase ghosts, sir?" Edric's gaze lingered on the river. "No, I mean to find what's left of the living." They buried their dead beneath the tower, marking the graves with stones. Then they mounted and rode on. The sun broke through at last, pale but steady, turning the rain-soaked fields to gold. For the first time in many days, Edric felt a spark of warmth. Not hope, perhaps, but the memory of it. As the road bent southward, he looked once more to the river. The current flowed steady and strong, carrying with it the debris of war, broken spears, shattered wood, the bones of the fallen. Yet the water glimmered in the sunlight, clear and bright. "The river remembers," he murmured, "but it also forgives." Tom heard him and gave a snort. "You think ghosts forgive, sir?" Edric smiled faintly. "No, but maybe men can learn to." They rode on, leaving the broken tower behind, and the sound of the river followed them like a promise whispered on the wind, low, steady, unending. The road south wound through the lowlands where reeds grew taller than a man and the earth never dried. The air was heavy with the scent of mud and decay, but beneath it, the faintest trace of spring lingered, the promise that even war's ruin could not wholly kill the land. Sir Edric Piper rode at the head of his small company, his armor dulled with rust, his thoughts darker still. The men who remained were quiet, their faces drawn. Tom Heddle rode nearest, his hand never far from his sword. Behind them trailed 2 younger knights, boys in truth, hardly old enough to remember a world before the war. They rode because they had nowhere else to go. They followed the river's bend for half a day until they reached a narrow crossing where the ruins of a stone bridge jutted from the water like broken teeth. Beyond it rose the black towers of old stones, ancient and half swallowed by the hills. Edric halted his horse, staring at the ruins. "The seat of House Mud," he said softly, "older than every crown in Westeros, and now little more than a memory." Tom spat into the mud. "Memories won't feed us, sir. Let's see if the old walls can at least keep the rain off." They crossed the shallows and climbed the slope. The castle loomed before them, vast and empty, its stones dark with lichen. Ravens nested in the broken battlements, their cries echoing through the air. Inside the great hall, moss crept across the floor where once kings had feasted. The wind sighed through the cracks in the walls, carrying the scent of water and old bones. Yet there was still a kind of majesty in the place, the quiet dignity of something too ancient to be destroyed entirely. As night fell, they built a fire in the hearth and ate what little they had left, hard bread and dried fish. The flames cast long shadows across the ruined walls, and the wind moaned softly through the open archways. Tom turned to Edric. "Where to now? We've seen no Freys for 2 days. No sign of this Lady Stoneheart either. Maybe she's gone." Edric shook his head. "She doesn't rest. You saw her by the river. She wanted us to come south." "To what end?" "I don't know," Edric admitted. "But I mean to find out." Tom grunted. "You sound like that Lannister priest again, chasing omens and ghosts." Edric smiled faintly. "Maybe I am, but sometimes ghosts tell truths the living refuse to see." The others soon slept, but Edric stayed awake, listening to the wind. It seemed to carry whispers, faint, broken, like the murmur of voices underwater. He rose and walked to the edge of the hall where the stones opened to the river valley below. The moon was rising, silvering the water, and there, among the reeds, he saw them, figures cloaked in gray, moving like shadows. The Brotherhood. Edric's heart quickened. He descended the slope alone, sword at his side. The moonlight caught upon a dozen faces, hard, pale, and watchful. At their head stood the woman he had met before, her eyes dark beneath her hood. "You've come," she said softly. "I told you I would," Edric replied. "The lady sent for us." The woman inclined her head. "She waits." He followed them through the reeds to where the river widened into a dark, still pool. The mist hung low, curling over the surface like breath, and from it emerged a shape, pale, silent, unmistakable. Lady Stoneheart. Her cloak clung to her like a shroud, her hair wet and tangled, her face drawn and lifeless save for the eyes, those terrible knowing eyes that burned with the memory of all she had lost. Edric knelt before her. "My lady," he said, voice low, "you've avenged the Red Wedding. Walder Frey is dead, his sons scattered. The Riverlands know your name. What more do you seek?" The dead woman did not answer at once. When she spoke, It was little more than a rasp. Peace. Edric looked up, startled, then let it end. Let the Riverlands heal. Stoneheart's gaze did not waver. Peace cannot be built upon rot. The lions still feast, the wolves are gone, and the river runs red. She raised a hand, pointing toward the south. There are still debts unpaid. The Freys are not the only ones who betrayed my house. Edric followed her gesture. Who then? Those who called themselves allies. The ones who stood aside while my son was murdered. Her voice was a hiss of wind through a grave. The Blackwoods, the Brackens, they quarreled while the North bled. Edric hesitated. They've suffered enough. Half their sons are dead. Their oaths are dead, she spat. The Riverlands must be purged before it can be reborn. Her words chilled him. You'd burn what's left of it to ash? I would cleanse it, she whispered. The Brotherhood stirred uneasily. Some nodded, others looked away. Edric saw the doubt in their eyes, the faint flicker of what they had once been before vengeance had hollowed them. He rose slowly. If this is your peace, my lady, it will never come. You cannot mend what you destroy. Stoneheart's gaze fixed on him, cold as the grave. Then you would stand against me? Edric's hand tightened on his sword. I would stand for the living. You've had your justice. Now let the rest of us have our lives. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, to his astonishment, she laughed. A dry, broken sound, like stones grinding together. You speak as my son once did, she said. But my son is dead. Her hand dropped, and the Brotherhood's men stepped forward. Edric drew his sword, though he knew it would mean little against so many. Before the blades could meet, a voice cried out from the darkness. Enough! All turned. A lone rider approached through the mist, his cloak sodden, his hair pale in the moonlight. Lancel Lannister. He dismounted, limping from an old wound, his chain of the seven glinting faintly. This must end, he said. You've taken the work of the gods into your own hands, and it will destroy you. Stoneheart's eyes flicked toward him. You still live. I live because mercy still has meaning, he said. But you are neither living nor dead. You are vengeance made flesh, and vengeance has no end. The silence that followed was long and heavy. The wind stirred the reeds, whispering like distant prayer. Stoneheart's hand trembled. For the first time, Edric thought he saw doubt behind her eyes, or perhaps only the memory of it. Lancel stepped closer. Let the dead rest. Let the living build what's left. The woman in gray lowered her hood, revealing a face pale and ruined beyond grief. Her lips parted, but no sound came. Then, slowly, she turned away, the mist closing around her like a shroud. The Brotherhood followed without a word, their torches vanishing one by one into the darkness until only the river remained, silent, endless, and cold. Lancel stood beside Edric, his face drawn. She'll not stop, he said quietly. Not truly. Not until the river runs clear again, or runs dry. Edric looked toward the water, where the moon's reflection shimmered like silver fire. Then we'll have to make sure it runs true, he said, for her sake, and for all of ours. The mist thickened once more, and the sound of the river rose, steady and eternal, carrying the ghosts of the fallen toward the sea. The dawn came cold and brittle over Old Stones. The mist was lifting, curling away from the ruins, like the breath of a dying giant. Edric Piper stood on the crumbling wall, watching the river glitter below, his cloak drawn tight against the chill. He had not slept. The night's encounter still burned in his mind. Lady Stoneheart's voice, hollow as an empty tomb. Lancel's sudden return from the mists, the weight of all that was broken in this cursed land. Behind him, the camp stirred. Tom Heddle cursed softly as he stoked the fire, muttering about damp wood and ghosts that refused to let men rest. The others moved quietly, avoiding one another's eyes. None spoke of what they had seen, as though silence might make it less real. Lancel sat apart, kneeling in prayer, his breath forming pale clouds in the morning air. His hands, clasped tight around his chain of the seven, trembled with exhaustion. Edric approached him. "You should rest. You've ridden far." "I'll rest when the gods do," Lancel murmured, not looking up. "She's not gone, Sir Edric. You know that?" Edric nodded. "Aye, but something changed last night. You saw it too." "She remembered herself," Lancel said, "for a heartbeat, and then it was gone. There's little left of the woman she was, only vengeance wearing her face." Tom spat into the dirt. "Then let her haunt the phrase till the stranger takes her. I've had enough of chasing corpses." Edric gave him a sharp look. "Watch your tongue. Whatever she's become, she was once a Stark, and this land loved the Starks." Tom muttered something under his breath, but said no more. The fire crackled softly. At midday, they rode down from the hill. The wind had turned from the east, carrying the smell of the sea. Seaguard lay not far now, a day's ride, maybe two. Edric had no plan beyond reaching the coast, but the thought of open sky and salt air drew him onward. The road wound through a valley strewn with old cairns. The stones were slick with moss, their names long forgotten. Crows perched atop them, watching with bright, hungry eyes. The world was still, too still. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. They came upon a narrow bridge spanning a deep ravine. A small shrine stood at its far end, its statue of the mother half toppled. A woman knelt before it, her gray cloak soaked through, her shoulders trembling with quiet sobs. Edric reined in his horse. "You there," he called. "Are you hurt?" The woman turned. Her face was pale and thin, her eyes red from weeping. "No, sire," she said. "Only mourning." He dismounted and approached. "For whom?" "My sons," she said. "Both slain at the Twins. I come here every year when the snow melts to pray for their souls, but the river took their bodies. I'll never see them again." Her voice trembled, and something in it made Edric's chest tighten. "The river remembers," he said softly. The woman nodded. "Aye, Sir Knight, but the river keeps what it remembers." Lancel had joined them. He laid a hand upon her shoulder. "The mother knows their names still. Let that be your comfort." The woman looked at him strangely. "Are you a holy man?" "I try to be." "Then pray for me," she said, and before they could answer, she rose and walked away, vanishing down the misty road. They watched her go until the sound of her steps was lost to the wind. Tom broke the silence first. "There's something foul about these lands. It clings to the air." "Foul or sacred," Lancel said. "Sometimes they're the same." By dusk, they reached the edge of a ruined village. Smoke rose from one of the cottages, thin and pale. Edric's hand went to his sword. "Careful," he murmured. "We're not alone." He dismounted and moved toward the light. The door of the cottage stood ajar, creaking softly in the wind. Inside, a fire burned low, casting shadows that writhed along the walls, and before the hearth sat a figure, cloaked, still, silent. "Who's there?" Edric called. The figure did not move. He stepped closer, sword raised. When he reached the hearth, the cloak slipped back, revealing the face of a man long dead. The eyes were open, clouded, the skin gray and drawn tight over bone. Tom swore behind him. Gods be good." The corpse was seated upright, its hands folded in its lap as though it had been placed there in prayer. Around its neck hung a strip of parchment scrawled in jagged letters. Lancel leaned in to read it. "For my sons," he whispered. Edric's heart sank. The woman. "She couldn't find their bodies," Lancel said, "so she made an offering of her own." Tom shuddered. "Madness." "Grief," Lancel corrected softly, "and grief breeds madness." Edric turned away, jaw clenched. The world had gone wrong, twisted beyond repair. Even love had curdled into something monstrous. They buried the body beneath the old oak outside the cottage. Lancel spoke the rites, his voice steady, though his hands shook. When it was done, they rode on in silence. That night they camped beside the sea. The salt wind howled through the reeds, and the sound of waves crashing on the rocks below drowned all speech. Edric stood on the cliff's edge, the moon painting the water silver. He thought of the woman's words, of the faces beneath the river, of Lady Stoneheart's hollow eyes. So much death, so much left undone. Lancel came to stand beside him. "The river ends here," he said. "All that was lost flows to the sea, even her." "You think she'll find peace in it?" Edric asked. Lancel shook his head. "Peace is for those who stop seeking it." Edric sighed. "Then none of us will ever have it." Below them, the tide surged, roaring like distant thunder. For a moment, he thought he saw shapes moving beneath the waves, pale and flickering, like faces glimpsed through a shroud of glass. When he blinked, they were gone. He turned from the sea. "Tomorrow, we ride for Seaguard. There are still frays in those lands. If we can drive them out, perhaps we can begin to mend what's been broken." Lancel nodded. "A beginning, then?" "Yes," Edric said. "A beginning." They returned to the camp, the sound of the sea fading behind them. The stars burned bright and cold above, and the wind whispered through the grass like the murmur of old prayers. And far to the east, somewhere beyond the mist and ruin, the river kept flowing, dark, eternal, and patient. The morning sky was a dull smear of gray when the riders left the cliffs behind. The sea wind drove clouds inland, bringing the promise of more rain. Seaguard's walls rose faintly in the distance, black and distant as a shadowed promise. The road that led there wound through broken farmland, where the bones of old fences jutted like ribs from the mud. Sir Edric Piper rode at the head of his dwindling company. He no longer wore his house's bright colors. The blue and silver that once gleamed in tourneys had faded to dull gray, stained by weeks of rain and blood. The war had scoured the pride from him, leaving only duty. Beside him rode Lancel Lannister, his face pale beneath his hood. The faint gleam of his septon's chain caught the light now and then, though he kept it tucked close to his chest, as if it burned him. Behind them came Tom Heddle and two others, boys no older than 17, their eyes too old for their years. They rode in silence, as all men did in the Riverlands now, for silence had become the truest prayer left. As they drew nearer to Seaguard, the signs of life grew, scattered camps of small folk, tattered banners fluttering from makeshift poles, and once the sound of a hammer ringing faintly over the din of the sea. The port had endured, if only barely. At a rise overlooking the town, they reined in. Below them, Seaguard's harbor spread wide, ships listing in the tide, the old tower watchful as ever. But the walls bore scars, and the great bell that had once sounded warnings for 1,000 years was cracked, a fissure running through its bronze heart. Tom gave a low whistle. "Still standing, by the gods." "Barely," Edric said. But that's more than can be said for most. They rode down through the gates unchallenged. The guards who watched from the towers wore no livery, only patched leather and tired faces. The war had stripped even Seaguard of its pride. Inside the courtyard, a handful of men gathered around a wagon laden with grain. A woman in a rust-red cloak oversaw the work, barking orders. She turned as the riders approached, tall, sharp-featured, her hair streaked with silver. "You wear no banners," she said. "What business brings you to Seaguard?" Edric dismounted. "Edric Piper of Pink Maiden. These are my men. We've come from the Twins by way of Oldstones." At the name, her eyes narrowed. "The Twins? You've a bold tongue, Sir Knight. Men still hang for speaking of that place." "Then let them hang me," Edric said. "I've no love for the phrase, nor they for me." The woman studied him, then nodded. "I am Lady Sybil Mallister, widow to Lord Jason's cousin. You'll find no fray welcome here." Her gaze moved to Lancel. "And you, sir? You carry the chain of the faith." "I carry its weight, my lady," Lancel said quietly. "And I've come to seek peace for these lands." She gave a thin smile. "Peace? You'll find none of that here, only rebuilding and remembrance." She gestured for them to follow. "Come, you'll take bread and shelter under my roof, but you'll earn it by listening." They entered the great hall, smaller than the Twins, but warmer, alive with the sound of hammers and hushed voices. Refugees sat along the walls, children asleep against their mothers' sides. Soldiers in patched mail drank quietly near the fire. Lady Sybil took her seat beneath the Mallister banner. "The Riverlands are dying, Sir Edric. We have bread enough for a month, salt for half that, and hope for less. The Freys still raid to the east, though their lord's dead. The wolves are scattered, and the Ironborn prowl our shores like carrion crows." Edric leaned forward. "Then let us help." "My sword's yours, my men's as well." "You'd fight for Seaguard?" she asked, her tone half disbelief, half amusement. "I'd fight for what's left of the Riverlands," Edric said. "If we hold one piece of it together, maybe the rest will follow." Lancel bowed his head. "We must rebuild not with steel, but with faith. These people need more than walls. They need reason to believe the gods haven't forsaken them." A bitter laugh escaped her. "You'll forgive me, sir, if I put my trust in walls before gods." The hall murmured agreement. Edric said nothing. He saw the pain in her eyes, the weariness of too many burials, too many promises unkept. That night, he stood on the ramparts, staring out across the dark sea. The moon hung low, its light glimmering off the waves. Somewhere in the distance, he thought he saw lanterns, ships perhaps, or only ghosts upon the water. Lancel joined him. "She's right," he said. "Walls can be rebuilt. Faith must be relearned. You sound more a knight than a priest." "Maybe I am both," Lancel said. "Maybe that's what these lands need, men who remember both mercy and steel." Before Edric could answer, a horn sounded, one short note, sharp and clear. The gate guards cried out, and movement rippled through the courtyard below. "Riders!" Tom shouted from below. "From the east!" Edric leaned over the parapet. A group of horsemen had appeared on the far road, bearing torches. The lead rider carried something slung across his saddle, a body wrapped in gray cloth. The gates opened at Lady Sybil's command. The riders entered, weary and mud-splattered. Their leader, a scarred man with hollow eyes, slid from his horse. "We found this by the river," he said. He gestured to the body. "The lady's work." The words chilled the air. Lancel moved forward and pulled back the shroud. A young man's face stared up, pale water swollen, the faint mark of a noose dark against his neck. "Frey blood," the man said. "One of the bastards, I think." Cybele frowned. "And this was meant for us to see?" "A warning," Edric said quietly. "She's close." Lancel crossed himself. "Not a warning, a message." They buried the corpse at dawn. The villagers gathered to watch, silent as the earth swallowed another son of the Riverlands. When it was done, Edric turned to the others. "We can't let her rule these lands by fear. If she means to cleanse the Riverlands, she'll burn it to ashes." Cybele met his gaze. "Then stop her." Edric's jaw tightened. "I will." Lancel stepped forward. "Not with anger, Sir Edric. With truth. She believes herself justice. We must remind her what that truly means." Tom muttered, "You can't reason with the dead." But Edric felt something stir within him. Not hope, exactly, but purpose. "Maybe not," he said, "but perhaps the living still can." As the first light of morning broke over Seagard, painting the sea in streaks of gold, Edric turned his horse eastward once more. The river called to him, soft, insistent, endless. Behind him, Lancel whispered a prayer. Ahead, the mist was rising again, and somewhere within it, a ghost waited. The dawn after Seagard's warning broke pale and sharp as a knife. A restless wind swept in from the sea, bending the reeds along the riverbanks and driving waves of mist inland. The air was heavy with the smell of salt and wet earth, a scent Edric Piper had come to know too well. He left Seagard behind, with only Tom and Lancel for company. The rest of his men had chosen to remain, worn by hunger and haunted by the promise of more ghosts on the road. Edric did not blame them. The Riverlands were a graveyard, and few had the will to walk among the dead again. The three rode east, following the Red Fork's glimmering path. Its waters were calm now, but every ripple seemed to whisper of unseen things beneath. Lancel rode ahead, his back straight, despite the fatigue in his frame, his chain of the seven glinting faintly in the dawnlight. Tom rode beside Edric, muttering, "We're chasing shadows, sir. The lady's no woman now. She's a curse. You can't reason with curses." Edric's eyes stayed on the road. "Maybe, but she's the only power left that men still fear. If we can turn her from wrath to reason." Tom barked a humorless laugh. "You'll talk a corpse into mercy. I've seen her work. Frey men hung from trees, their tongues cut out, their eyes pecked clean. That's no queen of mercy. That's the stranger's bride." "Then perhaps she's due a husband's counsel," Edric said grimly. They passed through meadows gone to ruin, where the grass grew high over the bones of fallen soldiers. Once, these fields had belonged to small folk who bent the knee to House Mallister, or Tully, or Piper. Now, they belonged to no one. The wind sang through the hollow helmets that still lay half-buried in the mud. Toward noon, they came upon a river crossing, an old ferry of rotting planks, its rope slack with disuse. Beside it stood a boy, barefoot and gaunt, no more than 10. He stared at them with wide eyes, a dagger clutched in his trembling hand. "Peace, lad," Edric called. "We mean no harm." The boy said nothing. His clothes were ragged, his face streaked with dirt and dried tears. Lancel dismounted and knelt before him, voice soft as the wind. "Who guards you here?" The boy shook his head. "No one left. My father went to fight the Freys. Never came back. Mother said she'd follow the lady by the river. Said the lady would keep her safe." Edric felt the chill crawl down his spine. "And did she?" The boy's eyes flicked toward the trees. "Mother never came back either." A shadow passed over the sun then, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The river, once still, began to stir. Lancel rose, his expression grave. "We should leave this place." But Edric's gaze lingered on the boy. "Come with us. There's safety in Seaguard." The child hesitated, then nodded. As he climbed onto Edric's horse, a voice whispered faintly through the trees, a woman's voice, soft and broken. "The river keeps what it remembers." Tom cursed and spurred his horse forward. "Seven, save us. She's near." They rode hard until the trees thinned and the river curved eastward again. Only then did Edric slow, glancing over his shoulder. The woods were silent. The boy clung to him, shaking. "She's not cruel," the child whispered. "She only hates liars." Edric exchanged a glance with Lancel, who said nothing. By dusk, they reached the ruins of Fairmarket. Once a thriving town, it now stood half sunk in silt and ash. The old bridge was gone, washed away, and only the jagged stumps of pilings jutted from the current like teeth. They found shelter in the shell of a burned inn. The roof had half collapsed, and the smell of smoke lingered in the timbers. They built a small fire in the hearth and shared what little food remained. The boy ate greedily, as though he hadn't tasted bread in days. When he finished, he sat close to the flames, eyes wide and fearful. "She walks at night," he said. "By the river. I've seen her." Edric looked up. "The lady?" The boy nodded. "Her eyes burn red like fireflies, and her mouth doesn't move when she speaks. The crows follow her. They listen." Tom muttered a prayer under his breath. Lancel regarded the child solemnly. "Did she speak to you?" "She said the phrase would drown," the boy whispered. And they did. The river rose and took them. Outside, thunder rumbled. The wind began to howl through the ruins, stirring the ashes. Edric stood. "Get some rest. We ride at dawn." But dawn never came easily in the Riverlands. Sometime in the deepest part of the night, Edric woke to the sound of the boy crying. The fire had burned low, casting long shadows that writhed across the walls. He rose and crossed the room. "Quiet now," he murmured. "You're safe." The boy's sobs quieted, but his eyes were fixed on something beyond Edric's shoulder. Slowly, Edric turned. She stood in the doorway, pale as the moon, her cloak dark with river water. Lady Stoneheart. Her gaze swept the room, stopping upon the boy. She raised one hand, pointing. Lancel stirred awake. "No," he said sharply, stepping between her and the child. "He's done no wrong." The dead woman's head tilted. The light from the fire gleamed in her eyes. Cold, pale gold. Edric drew his sword, though his hands trembled. "Lady Stark," he said, "your war is done. Let him be." For a heartbeat, he thought she might strike, but instead, she lowered her hand and spoke in that ruined, whispering voice. "Innocence lives where guilt has died. Guard it if you can." Then she was gone, fading like smoke into the night. The wind stilled. The fire crackled once, and silence returned. Lancel sank to his knees, breathing hard. "She's not beyond reach," he said softly. "Not yet." Edric sheathed his sword. His pulse still thundered in his ears, but beneath the fear lay something else. Understanding, perhaps, or pity. "She's bound to this river," he said. "As long as it runs, so will she." The boy crawled closer to the fire, curling against the warmth. Edric knelt beside him and draped his own cloak over the child's shoulders. "Sleep," he said gently. "We'll find your mother come morning." The boy nodded, eyes fluttering shut. Outside, the river murmured, its voice low and endless. Edric listened until his eyes grew heavy. The current sang of old debts and broken oaths, of mercy and vengeance entwined. When dawn finally came, the mist lay thick over the water once more. The boy still slept, untroubled. Lancel was already awake, gazing east where the river vanished into the haze. "She gave us a charge," he said, "to guard what's left of the innocent." Edric nodded slowly. "Then that's what we'll do." And as they rode from the ruins, the sun broke faintly through the fog, glinting off the water like the promise of something brighter, fragile, fleeting, but real. The dawn that followed was thin and fragile, as if the sky itself feared to open. The mist lingered over the river, wrapping the trees and the ruins in pale veils of silence. Edric Piper stood on the bank, his cloak heavy with dew, the boy still sleeping near the remains of their campfire. Beyond the fog, the river murmured its endless song, low, patient, eternal. Lancel Lannister prayed softly beside the water. His lips moved without sound, his hands clasped before him, his chain glinting faintly in the dim light. Tom Heddle sat a short distance away, cleaning his sword, his face set and tired. None spoke for a long while. When the sun finally broke through the clouds, Edric roused the boy. "Come, lad, we'll see you safe." The boy rubbed his eyes. "Where are we going?" "South," Edric said, "to Seaguard, where the walls are still strong." The child's voice was small. "What if she finds us again?" Edric hesitated. "Then we'll remind her of what she asked of us, to guard the innocent. And we'll remind her that she was once a mother too." The boy nodded and climbed into the saddle before him. The three riders set out along the river road, the mist curling at their heels. By midday they reached a fork where the water split around a small island. There, the remnants of an old bridge stretched toward the far bank, its arches cracked and green with moss. A single figure waited atop it, cloaked, motionless, her face hidden by a hood. Tom swore under his breath. "It's her again." Edric's hand went to his sword. "No, look closer." As they neared, the figure raised her head. She was not Stoneheart, but another woman, younger, alive, though worn and hollow-eyed. She wore the rags of a septa's robe, and around her neck hung a simple 7-pointed star. "Peace, travelers," she said. Her voice trembled. "I am Sister Alwyn, once of the Quiet Isle. I keep vigil here, where the river divides." Lancel dismounted at once, bowing his head. "Then may the seven bless you, sister." She looked at him strangely. "You wear the chain of the faith, but you do not serve the sept." "I serve what remains of it," Lancel said softly. Her gaze flicked to the boy, then back to Edric. "You carry one of the lost." "He's no kin of mine," Edric said. "His mother followed the lady by the river. We mean to see him safe." At the mention of the lady, Sister Alwyn's expression darkened. "She passes often, though she is no longer of the living. Each time she comes, the river rises, and the dead stir beneath its skin." "You've seen her?" Lancel asked. "Seen and heard," the woman replied. "She whispers of justice, but there is no peace in her voice. The seven have turned from her. Only the stranger walks beside her now." Lancel's face tightened. "Then perhaps she can yet be turned back." Alwyn shook her head. "No soul returns from such a darkness. Only mercy can end it." Edric frowned. "Mercy?" The septa looked toward the river, its waters glinting like dull steel. "The lady is bound to her grief. As long as her hatred lives, so does she. Break the chain, and her spirit will find the rest she was denied." Tom muttered, "And how are we supposed to break what death itself couldn't?" The septa's eyes found Edric's. "By reminding her that she was once loved." The word struck him like a blow. He thought of Lady Catelyn, the mother who had lost her sons, her husband, her home. He remembered the voice of Stoneheart in the dark, the flicker of pain that had crossed her face when she looked upon the boy. "If there's a way," Edric said slowly, "then I'll find it." Alwyn gave a weary nod. "Then go to the river's heart, where the two forks meet, near Fairmarket. She waits there when the moon is full." The full moon was 2 nights hence. They left the septa at the bridge and followed the water east once more. As dusk fell, they made camp beneath an old willow, the river whispering softly beside them. The boy slept quickly, his small hands clutching Edric's cloak. Lancel stared into the fire. "You mean to do it then?" he said. "Yes," Edric replied. "If there's even a chance to end this, I can't turn away. And if she kills you, then I'll die trying to remind her who she was." Lancel gave a faint smile. "You sound like the man she'd have wanted for one of her sons." Edric looked into the flames. "Maybe that's why she spared me so far." The next night was still and heavy. Clouds veiled the stars and the air smelled of rain. They reached the place the septa had spoken of, a wide, shallow bend where the 2 forks of the river met, forming a narrow island choked with reeds. The water there was strangely calm, as if holding its breath. They built no fire. The moon broke through the clouds only once, laying a pale path across the current. And then she came. From the mist rose a dozen figures, the Brotherhood, cloaked and silent. At their center walked Lady Stoneheart, her steps soundless upon the mud. She halted at the river's edge, her ruined face lit faintly by the moon. Edric stepped forward. "My lady." Her gaze fell upon him, and he felt the weight of centuries in her eyes. She raised her hand, pointing toward the boy. "The blood of my blood," she rasped. "He bears the face of my Rob, the eyes of the North. I cannot let him go." Edric's heart thundered. He's no Frey, no lion, no traitor. He's just a child. He is a reminder, she hissed, of what was lost, of what must be avenged. Edric took a step closer. "You were Catelyn Stark once, a mother. You knew love, not vengeance. You swore to protect the innocent, not destroy them." Her breath came in ragged gasps, though no air moved her chest. The Brotherhood shifted uneasily. Lancel stepped forward, raising his chain. "Remember who you were, Lady Stark. Remember your children's laughter, your husband's smile. Justice is not vengeance, it is mercy given shape." For a heartbeat, the world seemed to still. The river glimmered, its surface unbroken. Then Stoneheart's sword fell from her hand, splashing into the shallows. Her eyes closed. The wind rose, and the mist swirled around her like a shroud. When it cleared, she was gone. The Brotherhood bowed their heads, silent as the grave. One of them whispered, "She's free." Edric stared at the river. The moonlight danced upon it, and for the first time in many months, he thought he heard laughter, faint, distant, and pure. Lancel crossed himself. The gods remember mercy after all. Edric turned to the boy, who watched with wide, wondering eyes. "Come, lad," he said softly. "Let's go home." The river flowed beside them, calm and steady, carrying away the darkness of the night. It whispered as they rowed, not of vengeance now, but of peace, hard-won, fragile and fleeting, yet real. And when dawn broke over the riverlands, the water shone gold beneath the rising sun.